Welcome grade 12s to the September 2025 of the grade 12 preliminary exam. Okay, we are going to be looking at the counting principle. This is a very interesting question here that we have, right? A lot of students don't get this question, but if you stay tuned, you will understand it. Okay, we're given here the digits from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 are used to create 4 digits. So we've got the digits here from 0 to 7. They are used to create 4-digit code. Only 4, guys. 4-digit code means 4 spaces. It can also mean 4 slots, all right? That is 4-digit code. Now, in the first question, 10.2.1, how many different codes are possible if digits may be repeated? So we can repeat these digits here, which means we're going to create our 4 slots. 1, 2, 3, 4. Those are our 4 slots there because we are creating a 4-digit code. That's why I'm creating 4 slots there. How many different codes are possible if digits may be repeated? So we are repeating these digits. In total, they are 8 digits in total. So in the first slot, I'm going to write an 8 here in the first slot. That's an 8 there. All right. I'm going to write an 8 in the first slot. In the second slot, it's an 8 again. It is because I'm repeating these digits here. Third slot is still an 8. Fourth slot is still an 8. Then you multiply there. You multiply like that. And this is the same as 8 to the power 4. And 8 to the power 4 is the same as 4096. That is our solution there. But in question 10.2.2, if the digits may not be repeated, now we are not repeating these digits now. How many different codes are possible? So we're going to form our 4 slots there. These are our 4 slots. 1, 2, 3, 4. Those are our 4 slots there. Now we are not repeating. All right. In total, I am having 8 digits. From 0 to 7, there are 8. I'm not repeating. It means that in the second slot, I'm going to have a 7. I use another digit. I'm going to be left with only 6. Going to be left with only 6. I use another digit again. Going to be left with only a 5. Then you multiply that, you multiply that. So after multiplying those, the answer that you're going to get is 1680. That's the answer there. That's the solution. Let's come to the more interesting question here. This interesting question, question B. All right. Calculate the probability that a code will be a number between 2000 and 6000. Please note this down, all right? Please note this down. The word between there, this word between, it means we are excluding 6000. It means 6000 is what? Is excluded there. So this 6000 there is excluded. So when we say between 2000 and 6000, that are divisible by 5, it means we're excluding 6000, which means that number can be a number from 2000 to 5999. Right. So which digits may we use there? Which digits are we supposed to use? It means we are going to use digits from 2, 3, 4, 5. Can you see? Because these range from 2000 to 5999. All right. With a 2, we can form a 2000. With a 3, we can form a 3000. With a 4, we can form a 4000. And with a 5, we can form a 5000. So that was the first restriction. Let me call it R1. Okay. Let me call it R1 to show that this is restriction number 1 here. So R1, this is R1 here. Restriction number 1. Okay. That is restriction number 1. Let's go to restriction number 2. Restriction number 2, guys, they said that are divisible by 5. Look at that. They should be what? Divisible by 5. Divisible by 5, we know that any number that ends with a 0 is divisible by 5. For example, I can take a 10. A 10, can you see that a 10 is ending with a 0 here? So it is divisible by 5. All right? Even 100 is ending with a 0, so it's divisible by 5. So any number that is ending with a 0, it is divisible by 5. Also, a number that is ending with a 5. Look at 55. Can you see that it's ending with a 5? So it is divisible by 5. So we can say that the numbers that are divisible by 5, it is 0 and 5. 0 and 5, because any number that ends with a 0 and 5 are divisible by 5. So there, we are going to say it is 0 and 5 there. So in brackets, I'm going to write 0 and 5. This is 0 and 5 there. Can you see that? Now, let's answer the question. Let's answer the question. I have looked at the two restrictions. The first restriction, they said between 2,000 and 6,000. But when they say between, just note that 6,000 is excluded, which means we are going to look at numbers from 2,000 to 5,999. That is the first restriction. Second restriction, they continue to say that are divisible by 5. Divisible by 5, it must be a number that is ending with a 0 or 5. So it means we're going to look at 0 and 5. All right. Now, let's start with restriction number 1. Let's begin with restriction number 1. So if here if I start with a 2, right? We're creating a 4-digit code, remember. If I start with a 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. If I start with a 2 here, I'm starting with a 2. How many possible ways can I use a 2? Okay? In numbers from 0 to 7, how many 2s are there? How many 2s can I use? There's only one choice. So there's only one possibility that I can use a 2. Then let's look at the second restriction. This restriction here, all right? Divisible by 5. If the number is divisible by 5, then at the end, it should end with a 0 or a 5. So let's go to the last restriction there. It's 0 and 5 because it's divisible by 5, which means at the last slot there, I'm going to put a 0 and a 5. So how many possibilities are there? There are 2 possibilities. Can you see that? There are 2 possibilities. So I'm going to write a 2 because I can use a 0 or a 5. So I have used one number in the first slot and then one of the 2 numbers in the last slot. So in total, I've used 2. All right. Out of 8 numbers, I've used 2. So I'm going to say 8 minus 2 because from 0 to 7, there are 8 numbers. So out of 8, I have used 2 numbers, 1 in the first slot and 1 in the last slot. So I'm going to be left with only 6. So I'm going to write 6 here and then a 5 there. Then you're going to multiply, guys. You're going to multiply. When you multiply this, you're going to get a 60. This is going to be a 60 when you multiply. Let's go to when I start here with a 3. Now let's start with a 3. It's a 4-digit code. Let's not forget 1, 2, 3, 4. Going to multiply these here. Going to multiply, it's a 4-digit code. So I'm going to multiply those, right? If I start with my 3 here, I start with a 3. So if I start with a 3 here, I put a 3 in the first slot. How many ways can I use a 3? How many possibilities there? There's only one possibility. Let's go to the last slot. Remember, it should be divisible by 5. So how many possibilities are there? There are only 2 possibilities. There are only 2 choices, which means I can use a 0 or a 5. In the first slot, I've used 1 digit, a 3. In the last slot, I've used either a 0 or a 5. So I've used 2 in total. 8 minus 2, still a 6. 6 and then times 5 there. I'm also going to get a 60 here. Okay? Let's go now to when I start with a 4. Now I'm starting with a 4, right? I start with a 4. I start with a 4 here. There. So I'm going to create my 4 slots. 1, 2, 3, 4. Those are my 4 slots there that I'm going to create. If I start with a 4, there's only one way of using a 4. And then let's go to divisible by 5. There's 0 and 5 there. So there are 2 possibilities, 2 ways. Okay? I've used one number, which is a 4 in the first slot, and then another number in the last slot, either a 0 or a 5. So in total, I've used 2. 8 minus 2, going to be left with only a 6 times a 5 there. Then you multiply those. You are still going to get a 60, right? But when I start with a 5 now, something that is going to happen. There's something that is going to happen that is very interesting. Let's start with a 5, right? There's something interesting that is going to happen now. There's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. There are 4 slots, right? We keep that in mind. So there are 5 here. I'm going to start with a 5. I'm going to put a 5. There's only one way of using a 5. Then in the last slot, there's 0. Then there's 5 here. There are 2 ways, all right? There are 2 choices there. But there's something interesting here, guys. I've used a 5 in the first slot. Can I use this 5 in the last slot? No, because I'm not supposed to repeat this. So a 5 in the last slot, we cancel it like this, all right? We just erase it. So how many choices are there in the last slot? All right? There's only one choice now. So when I've used a 5 in the first slot, I cannot use it again in the last slot. I cannot repeat it. All right. So there's only one choice in the last slot. Now I've used one number, which is a 5 in the first slot, and I've used a 0 in the last slot. So in total, I've used 2 out of 8. 8 minus 2, that's going to be 6. So it's going to be 6 times a 5. 6 times a 5 is going to be a 30. So we are going to add all these numbers here. So it's going to be 60 times 3. Okay, we're going to add these numbers here. This 60, that 60, that 60, and that 30 there. When we add them, okay, we're going to say, so total possibilities, all right? So this is a total possibility or total possible ways. Possible ways is equal to 60 times a 3 plus 30, all right? 60 times a 3 plus a 30, that is going to be a 210. So there are 210 possible ways, all right? But the question said they want the probability. So they said calculate the probability that a code will be a number between 2000 and 6000 and that are divisible by a 5. And because they are looking for probability is equal to the total number, right? Probability is going to be the total number of possible ways. This is probability here. So probability is going to be equal to total number of possible ways, which is 210, the number that we just got now. The total number of possible ways divided by the sample space. The sample space, remember the sample space is 1680. 1680, we got that from the previous question, right? And the answer that we're going to get here is actually 1 over 8, or someone can write it as 0,125. All right. So thank you for watching and God bless. That is only for 5 marks, guys. Please get this in the exam. Get a total for this. All right. Please like, subscribe for more.